Hello dear children, welcome to the class. Today is the first session of this chapter National Income and Related Aggregates, and we are going to learn about some basic concepts of national income accounting. To begin with, let's first understand what is macroeconomics. Now macroeconomics is the study of economic behavior of the economy as a whole. In class 11th, we have learnt about microeconomics, where we learned the behavior of demand of an individual consumer, that what is individual demand or a market demand. But in macroeconomics, we are going to study the behavior of the aggregate demand of the whole economy as a whole. Similarly, we are going to study about aggregate supply. Aggregate supply we talk about from the point of view of the producers. So aggregate supply of the economy as a whole, whereas in microeconomics, we talked about individual supply or market supply. So we are going to focus our attention on aggregate measures such as total output, total employment, aggregate price levels, etc. We are interested in finding out how the level of these aggregate measures are determined means how we are going to determine the aggregate demand, aggregate supply, aggregate employment, aggregate output, aggregate income. How is the level of these aggregate measures change over time? Fine. And how these aggregates change over time, that also we study in macroeconomics. Some of the important questions that are studied in macroeconomics are: first, what is the level of total output of the economy? How is the total output determined? So here we are talking about the output of the total output of the economy as a whole. How does the total output grow over time? Are the resources of the economy, that is your land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur, fully employed? What are the reasons behind unemployment of resources, and why do prices rise? So these are the few questions which are studied in the macroeconomics, and we try to find the answers by using various theories. So macroeconomics try to study the behavior of aggregate or macro measures of the performance of the economy. Now the first concept of national income accounting is your distinction between final good and intermediate good. And we are going to decide that whether a good is a final good or an intermediate good on the basis of the end use of the good. Fine. कि इसका end use क्या है, इस गुड को कौन कंज्यूम कर रहा है, किस पर्पस के लिए कंज्यूम कर रहा है, that is going to be the determining factor to decide whether the good is a final good or an intermediate good. Now final goods are the goods which are purchased either for consumption by the household for the satisfaction of want, and such goods are known as consumption goods, or final goods are being purchased for investment. Investment means your capital or investment goods, and these are called final goods because they are ultimately used for the final consumption. So expenditure on them is called final expenditure, and that is why they are termed as final goods. Now see, this is an example. A machinery purchased by a firm for installation in a factory, and the purpose of purchase of this machinery is it's a final good. Why? Because it is for the investment purpose. Fine. We are going to invest in the machinery for a factory. So it is purchased for final investment, and that is why it's a final good. Now, milk purchased by household is a final good as it is purchased for final consumption. Then, furniture purchased by a school is also final good because it is purchased for investment. Computer installed in office is a final good because it is purchased for investment. A second-hand car purchased by a household is also going to be a final good. It is going to be purchased for consumption. Printer purchased by a lawyer for office use is going to be a final good because it is purchased for investment. Blackboard used in a school is a final good because it is purchased for investment and it is not completely used. It is not used completely in a year but remains for production of educational services. So all these goods are going to be final goods. Why? Because they are being used either for final consumption or for investment. Now let's come to the next type of goods, that is intermediate goods. Goods and services purchased by a production unit from other production units with the purpose of, देखिए यहाँ तो हमने एक प्रोडक्शन यूनिट ने दूसरे प्रोडक्शन यूनिट से गुड्स परचेज किए हैं और परचेज करने का जो पर्पस है वो कंजम्पशन नहीं है. द पर्पस ऑफ परचेजिंग द गुड बाय वन प्रोडक्शन यूनिट from the other production unit is either to resell it by keeping up little bit of profit margin. The another production unit who have purchased the goods is going to resell it or use them completely during the same year. या रॉ मटेरियल परचेज किया है तो रॉ मटेरियल को प्रोसेस करके completely यूज कर लेंगे in the same year, and such goods are known as intermediate products. So intermediate goods are the raw material, and the another name for raw material is your non-factor input. आपके factor inputs, there are 4: land, labor, capital and entrepreneur. There are 4 factor inputs. The raw material or non-factor inputs purchased for producing goods, they are intermediate goods and they are also called single-use producer goods. The raw material और नॉन फैक्टर इनपुट, रॉ मटेरियल को नॉन फैक्टर इनपुट भी बोलते हैं. दे आर परचेज्ड फॉर प्रोड्यूसिंग गुड्स and such goods are known as single use producer goods and they are intermediate goods. The second is expenditure on intermediate good is called intermediate cost or intermediate consumption. Now let's look at few examples. Steel sheets used for making automobile. Fine. Steel sheets used for making automobiles, or you can see the copper used for making utensils. So these are intermediate goods because they are being purchased with the purpose of using them completely during the same year. देखिए आपने स्टील शीट को परचेज किया, उसको मोल्ड किया, शेप दी, कार के डिफरेंट कंपोनेंट्स, बॉडी पार्ट्स बनाए, फाइन, और वो डिफरेंट शेप, मतलब स्टील जो था उसने अपनी बिल्कुल शेप चेंज कर ली, अपना जो भी डिजाइन था दैट इज कंप्लीटली चेंज्ड. सेम वे कॉपर इज बीइंग कन्वर्टेड इनटू यूटेंसिल्स. सो दे आर बीइंग यूज्ड अप. The steel and copper are being used up in the production process and they have completely changed their shape or appearance, so they will be termed as intermediate goods. Then mobile sets purchased by a mobile dealer. Fine. Mobile sets purchased by a mobile dealer, it is being purchased for reselling it. ठीक है, जो मोबाइल डीलर है वो इसको परचेज करता है for reselling it, and that is why it is known as intermediate good. Now chalk and duster, etc., which is purchased by the school. Here they are intermediate product because they are used up completely during the year. Fine. So they are being used as an intermediate product. See, teachers use them for rendering their services. Fine. So chalk and duster will be acting as a non-factor input by the teachers in the education for imparting education. In the education sector, chalk and duster, it is being used by the teacher as a non-factor input for rendering their services. That is why it is an intermediate product. Next is paper purchased by a publisher. It is purchased with the purpose of converting it, publishing the book and converting that paper into a book or a notebook form. So it will be an, paper will be an intermediate product. Then the purchase of rice by the grocery shop, and it is being purchased for reselling. If a grocer is purchasing a rice, he is purchasing the rice for reselling. So again, it's an intermediate good, but the purpose is to resell. Now, coal used by a manufacturing firm, it is used as a non-factor input for further production. So it's an intermediate product. Fertilizers used by the farmer, and it is purchased with the purpose of producing a good amount of grains. So again, the fertilizers will be used as an intermediate product by the farmers. Cotton used by spinning mill, fine, it will be an intermediate product because it is used for further production of cloth during the same year. So it is going to be consumed and the cotton is going to be converted into cotton cloth. I hope by these examples the distinction between final and intermediate good is clear to everyone. Now let me point out over here कि हम ये डिस्टिंक्शन कर ही क्यों रहे हैं, फाइनल गुड और इंटरमीडिएट गुड में हमने क्यों डिस्टिंक्शन किया. बेटा रीजन ये है कि व्हेन वी आर कैलकुलेटिंग नेशनल इनकम, only the money value of final goods will be considered for calculating the national income and not the intermediate good. Now, the same good may be a final or an intermediate good. Again, the deciding criteria is the end use of the product. The end use of a good is the principal basis of classifying the goods into intermediate good and final good. Now you can see that the good is sugar. When sugar is used by the household in milk or tea, it's a final good. Whereas when this sugar is used by a baker as a raw material in the production of a biscuit, it is going to be termed as a intermediate good. So the good is the same, but the end use of the product is going to determine whether the good is a final good or an intermediate good. Now, good may be used partially as intermediary and partially as final. A good as such is not to be named as final or intermediary. Milk as such is not to be taken as final or intermediary. Accordingly, entire milk sold by the dairy farmers in a village may not be a final good. Only that part of it is treated as final good which is sold to the consumer household. Because consumer household क्या करेंगे? They will be using them for drinking milk, for preparing tea, and finally the milk is consumed. So that is why the milk which is consumed by the household is termed as final good, whereas the other part which is sold to the producer for making sweet and which is used as a raw material is to be treated as an intermediate good. Now we have quoted many examples to make the distinction between intermediate good and final goods. So let's distinguish between the two, intermediate good and final good. The first point is intermediate goods are the goods, they may be used as raw material for the production of other goods during the accounting year, whereas final goods are not used as raw material for the production of the other goods during the accounting year. Intermediate goods may be resold by the firm for profit during the accounting year. Fine. If the intermediate good is being purchased for the purpose of reselling it, तो जब हम रीसेल करते हैं बेटा एक ट्रेडर, तो he keeps a little bit of profit margin. So intermediate goods may be resold by the firms for profit during the accounting year, and final goods are not resold by the firm for profit during the accounting year. Final goods resell नहीं करते. Final goods तो consumer ने खरीद लिया, तो they are going to consume it. They are not going to resell it. Intermediate goods remain within the boundary line of production and are not ready for use by their final users. On the other hand, final goods are outside the boundary line of production and are ready for use by their final users. The next point of distinction is the value of the intermediate good is yet to be added to these goods. The value is yet to be added to these intermediate goods. Value added means कि intermediate goods को हमें उनका या तो form change करनी पड़ती है ना. Let's say suppose sugar is there, so we are going to add some more ingredients. Fine. Bake, like we are going to add maida and then bake that maida with sugar and convert it into biscuit, converted into final good, and then they are to be sold in the market. So in intermediate good, value is yet to be added, but final goods, they are complete and value is not to be added to these goods. They are finally sold to the ultimate consumer. Consumers consume them. That is why they are being termed as final good. Intermediate goods are not included in the estimation of national product or national income, whereas final goods are included in the estimation of national product or national income. बेटा तभी हमने ये डिस्टिंक्शन करी है, सिर्फ फाइनल गुड्स जो होते हैं उनकी वैल्यू हम नेशनल इनकम को कैलकुलेट करते समय कंसिडर करते हैं, whereas इंटरमीडिएट गुड्स को हम कंसिडर नहीं करते. Accounting year is a year during which production of goods and services is estimated in the domestic economy, or it is a year during which national product or national income is estimated for the country. So we are going to consider the value of all the final goods and services that are produced in an accounting year for the purpose of calculation of national income. I hope the concepts which we have discussed so far is clear to everyone. So national income includes the value of final goods only. Value of intermediate good is not included in national income estimates. Why? So the answer is going to be because the intermediate goods, we need to add more value to them. Then only they are ready for the final consumption. Fine. So including intermediate goods separately will inflate और overestimate the national income, क्योंकि बेटा intermediate good की जो value है वो final good में already included होती है ना. Suppose अगर let's take that example only. If we are buying the biscuit, the sugar in the biscuit is already going to be, the cost of the sugar is going to be included in the selling price of the biscuit. Fine. So intermediate goods separately, if we are going to include intermediate goods separately while calculating the national income, so that is going to inflate or overestimate the national income. Now, significance of distinction between the intermediate goods or final good. Let's understand this with the help of an example. Now see, this is firm A, and firm A bought cloth for rupees 2000 to be used as a raw material in the production of shirts. Now the cloth is being purchased to be converted into shirts. The shirts were sold for rupees 5000 by firm A to the final consumer who ultimately is going to wear that shirt. The value of the cloth, 2000, is the value of the intermediate good, and hence it will not be included in the national product or national income. The value of rupees 5000 includes the value of cloth, that is rupees 2000. Therefore, in the calculation of national income, the value of only final goods, that is shirts of rupees 5000, would be included. I hope that this concept of intermediate good and final good, the distinction between the two, the significance, the example, and the purpose of intermediate goods and final goods is clear to everyone. I hope all of you have enjoyed the learning today and understood the concept in totality. That's all for today from my side. Thank you very much.